Now I'm going to demonstrate the Peak Atlas ESR70, also called the ESR Plus. ESR70 measures capacitor ESR, which is equivalent series resistance. Electrolytic and some other capacitors, ESR is a very important characteristic. When they start to go bad, their ESR goes high, limiting the amount of current that they can handle. And the only way you can detect that is with an ESR meter. Cannot detect it with a normal capacitor meter or with a volt-ohm milliamp meter, because it's dealing with a capacitor and it cannot detect the equivalent series resistance. Only an ESR meter can do that. ESR70 also measures any low resistance, anything from 40 ohms down to 10 milliohms. It measures the capacitance value. It has an audible alert feature, which is a very handy way to allow you to keep your focus on your work. You don't have to glance away at the meter. And it automatically discharges any capacitors that you might be checking that have a charge on them and you don't know about it. ESR70 will discharge them safely. That's a very handy feature. It protects both you and your equipment. So let's take a look at what ESR70 does. It comes complete with very nice quality alligator clips. I've connected a capacitor, 1000 microfarad at 35 volts. And let's turn ESR70 on and see what it does. You may have heard those two bings. That's the audible alert system. I'll give you more details on that later. So it measured this capacitor at 959.4 ohms and with an ESR of 0.01 or 10 milliohms. Is that good or is that bad? Well, let's take a look and find out. I'll zoom out here so you can get a better look at this. This is the manual that comes with ESR70. Very nice manual, all the details in it. And included in that manual is this chart. Let's zoom in on that a little bit here. There you go. Maybe you can read that. I hope so. Along the top of the chart, horizontally, is a range of capacitor voltage ratings from 10 volts to 250 volts. And on this side, vertically, is a range of capacitor values from 4.7 microfarads to 10,000 microfarads. The reason the chart is organized that way is ESR is a function of both the rated voltage of the capacitor and the capacitance value. It varies with those two characteristics. And that's why no ESR meter can give you a good-bad indication, because there's no way for the meter to detect what the rated voltage of that capacitor is. It can detect, as ESR70 does, the capacitance, but it cannot detect the rated voltage. So you have to consult a chart. Now we just checked a 1000 microfarad capacitor at 35 volts, so it go across here, and it says the highest ESR value for that capacitor is 0.11 ohms. So anything below 0.11 ohms is good, and we measured 20 milliohms, so that capacitor is fine. Let's take a look at another one here. I'm going to turn the meter back on because I want to show you another characteristic. We'll let it go ahead and measure that capacitor again. Okay, comes up with a very similar reading. And now I'm going to connect another capacitor. This one is a smaller one, 22 microfarad at 35 volts. I'm doing this so you can see that as you go from capacitor to capacitor, you don't have to restart the meter, you don't have to push any buttons. It automatically detects that there's another component connected and it measures it. So you can go from capacitor to capacitor and it will continue to measure it. This one it measures at 20.7 microfarads and the ESR is 0.94 ohms. Back to the chart. Oops. For 22 microfarads, 35 volts, it says the maximum good ESR is 5.1 ohms. This is 0.94 ohms, so that capacitor is also good. Now let's investigate the beeps a little bit. Again, if you go to the next page in the manual, it describes what those beeps are about. And when it's measuring, there are three different levels. If it measures a resistance greater than 40 ohms, there'll be a high-low beep. An ESR of less than 5 ohms, there's a single ping, and ESR less than 1 ohm, there's a double ping, ping, ping. So let's take a look at that. I've got a resistor here that's 5.51 ohms, I'm sorry. Let's connect it and measure it. This is not a capacitor, it's just a resistor. It's outside the 40 ohm limit. Let's see what ESR70 does with that. Did you hear that two-level beep? That means that the resistance it measured was greater than 40 ohms, and it tells you this is not a capacitor. It's either in circuit with resistors around it, or the capacitor itself is leaky, or it's a resistor, which this is, and the ESR is greater than 40 ohms. I'll connect another resistor in here, and we'll listen for the beeps again. This one I think is let's see what we get here. Oh, it wasn't quick enough, so ESR70 turned off. That's all right. And here we go. Measures this one as 5.6 ohms, which is exactly what it's supposed to be. And you hear those beeps. That's the audible alert system. Now I also want to show you the options you have for probes. ESR70 has 2mm banana plugs, so you can plug a variety of probes. These are very nice. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more here and get a good idea of these. These are very nice prods, very fine prod for printed circuit board work. Plug them into the banana plugs, and you can use them for going from capacitor to capacitor on a printed circuit board. Now that brings up the question, can you use ESR70 in circuit? Yes, you certainly can, but there's a but. Many power supply rails that run along a printed circuit board have several capacitors hanging on them at different locations. Although all those capacitors are in parallel, which means that their ESR is in parallel. So it's possible that you could have one bad one, a high ESR, hidden by all of the good ones that have low ESR, which are connected in parallel. The only way to be sure in that particular circumstance is to disconnect all but one capacitor. You only have to disconnect one lead and check each one individually, and that's the only way to find the one possible bad ESR in the bunch. Okay, next we're going to take a look at the automatic discharge function. Okay, I've put a charge on this capacitor. You can see on the meter there it's about 19.4 volts now. I'll connect ESR70. And turn it on. As you can see, it discharged the capacitor, and now it takes its measurement, giving you the capacitance value and the ESR. So while we don't recommend that you work around charged capacitors, if you should make a mistake and one of them has a charge on it, ESR70 will discharge it before it makes its measurement. That's a very handy thing. Might save your instrument and protect you at the same time.